What if the most important relationship you will ever have is the one you have been neglecting your entire life, the one with yourself? I want to tell you something that I have never said out loud to very many people. For a long time, a long, uncomfortable, embarrassing amount of time, I did not like myself very much. Not in the dramatic crisis kind of way that makes for a neat story. It was quieter than that. It was more like a low hum in the background of everything I did. A constant, barely conscious sense that I was somehow not quite enough. Not smart enough, not interesting enough, not disciplined enough, not the right kind of person. And the worst part was that I had lived with this feeling for so long that I had stopped noticing it. It had just become the weather, the permanent climate of my inner world. And from the outside, nobody would have known. I functioned, I showed up, I was reasonably productive, reasonably social, reasonably okay. But inside, I was running on a kind of silent exhaustion that came from constantly trying to compensate for the person I secretly believed I was, which was someone fundamentally lacking. Someone who needed to work harder, achieve more, be better, do more, prove something. I did not know what I was trying to prove or to whom, but the proving never stopped. That is what a lack of self-love actually looks like in real life. Not dramatic self-destruction, not obvious crisis, just this endless, quiet grind of never feeling like you were allowed to rest, never feeling like you have earned the right to simply exist without justifying yourself, always one achievement away from deserving peace, always waiting to feel okay about yourself until some external condition finally gave you permission. The first place I noticed it, really noticed it, was in my relationships. I had a pattern. I would meet someone and almost immediately begin shrinking, not dramatically, subtly. I would start monitoring what I said to make sure it landed well. I would soften opinions I actually held because I was not sure they would be well received. I would agree with things I did not agree with. I would laugh at things I did not find funny. I would make myself smaller and easier and more palatable because somewhere underneath everything, I was terrified that if people saw the actual, unfiltered version of me, they would find it disappointing. And here is the brutal irony of that. The version of me I was performing, the agreeable, accommodating, always fine version, was not actually someone I respected. I was shape-shifting into someone more likable and ending up feeling less like myself than ever. And then I would feel lonely inside those relationships, even when they were going well on the surface, because I knew that the person being liked was not fully me. I was getting validation for a performance, not for my actual self. And validation for a performance does nothing for your self-worth. Nothing. Because deep down, you know it is not real. This is the cruel mathematics of low self-love. You do not show people who you really are because you are afraid they will not accept you. So they accept a version of you that is not really you, and you still feel unaccepted. The very thing you are trying to avoid, rejection, becomes the invisible architecture of every relationship you build. I also noticed it in how I handled failure. And I don't mean catastrophic failure, I mean ordinary, everyday failure, the kind that happens to everyone constantly. Missing a deadline, saying something clumsy in a conversation, making a bad decision, forgetting something important. For most people, these things are annoying and then they're over. For me, they became evidence. Every small mistake was filed away as proof of the case I was building against myself. A case that said, you see, this is who you are. You are the person who gets things wrong. You are the person who cannot be trusted to get it right. You are the person who falls short. I would replay conversations in my head for days, lie awake at night reconstructing situations and identifying every place I had been inadequate. I called this self-improvement. I told myself I was being hard on myself because I had high standards, but that was not true. High standards look like, I made a mistake, I understand what went wrong, I will do better next time. What I was doing looked like, I made a mistake and this confirms that I am fundamentally defective. That is not a standard, that is a punishment, and I was punishing myself constantly for the crime of being human. The moment things started to shift was not glamorous. There was no thunderbolt, no single conversation that changed everything. It was more like I got tired, genuinely, deeply tired of the weight of it, tired of the constant internal courtroom where I was always both the prosecutor and the defendant, tired of the exhausting performance of being acceptable, tired of waking up and the first thought in my head being some version of what is wrong with me today. And in that tiredness, I started to ask a different question. Instead of asking, what is wrong with me, I started asking, what would I say to someone I loved who was treating themselves this way? And the answer was immediate and obvious. I would tell them to stop. I would tell them they were being cruel to themselves. I would tell them that no decent person deserves the kind of relentless internal criticism they were living with. I would tell them that mistakes are not character indictments. I would tell them that needing things, rest, support, kindness, understanding, is not weakness. It is just being alive. And then I had to sit with the uncomfortable follow-up question. Why was I so willing to extend that understanding to everyone except myself? That question cracked something open, because when I really looked at it, I realized that I had absorbed a belief somewhere along the way, from family, from culture, from years of comparison and criticism, that self-compassion was self-indulgence, that being kind to yourself was a luxury for people who had already earned it, that you were supposed to push and criticize and demand and drive yourself until you finally became someone worthy of your own acceptance, and then, maybe then, you could be gentle with yourself. But that day never comes. I know this now. The version of yourself that you are waiting to become before you start loving yourself does not exist. You will always find something new to fix. There will always be a new inadequacy to address, a new standard to meet, a new version of not quite enough. Self-love is not a reward you collect after personal improvement. It is the foundation from which genuine personal growth actually becomes possible. You cannot build a stable life on a foundation of self-contempt. I tried. The building keeps collapsing.
When I started practicing self-love, and I use the word practicing deliberately because it is absolutely a practice, not a switch you flip, the first thing I had to learn was to separate my worth from my performance. This sounds straightforward, but it goes against almost everything most of us were taught. We were taught in 1,000 direct and indirect ways that our value is conditional, that we are worth love and respect when we perform well, when we behave correctly, when we achieve, when we please, when we fit the expected shape. Worth was always transactional, always earned, always contingent. Unlearning that is real work. It does not happen through a single realization. It happens through hundreds of small moments where you catch yourself tying your worth to an outcome and consciously untie it, where you notice the voice that says you are only as good as your last success and you choose not to believe it, where you make a mistake and instead of spiraling into self-indictment, you say, "That happened. I am learning. I am still okay." The second thing I had to learn was how to be honest about what I actually needed, not what I should need, not what a strong, self-sufficient, impressive person would need, what I actually honestly needed. And sometimes what I needed was rest when I thought I should be productive. Sometimes what I needed was to say no when I had been saying yes out of guilt. Sometimes what I needed was to cry without immediately trying to stop myself. Sometimes what I needed was to ask for help without prefacing it with 14 apologies and explanations for why I could not handle it alone. Needs are not weaknesses. This seems obvious when you say it out loud, but most of us live as if we genuinely believe the opposite. We override our needs constantly in the name of being capable, being low maintenance, not burdening people, not appearing vulnerable. And over time, consistently ignoring your own needs does not make you stronger. It makes you resentful and depleted and disconnected from yourself. You cannot pour from an empty vessel. You cannot love other people well when you are running on fumes. Tending to your own needs is not selfishness. It is basic maintenance of the only person you are guaranteed to spend your entire life with. There is one more thing I want to say about self-love that I rarely hear discussed honestly. Self-love does not mean you think you are perfect. It does not mean you stop growing or stop trying to become better. It does not mean blind self-acceptance, where you refuse to acknowledge your flaws or take responsibility for your behavior. That is not self-love. That is avoidance wearing a wellness costume.
Real self-love means you hold yourself with warmth and accountability at the same time. It means you can say, I did not handle that well, and I am going to do better, and I still fundamentally deserve my own respect. It means you can look at the parts of yourself that need work without declaring those parts as evidence of your unworthiness. It means you can be a work in progress and still be okay, still be enough, still be someone worth treating with care and dignity and basic human kindness, starting with the kindness you extend to yourself. I am not standing here telling you I have mastered this. I still have days where the old voice is loud, where I catch myself deep in self-criticism before I even realize it has started, where I shrink in a room I should occupy confidently, where I over-explain myself or over-apologize or agree when I should push back. But the difference now is that I notice it, and noticing it gives me a choice. I can step back from the spiral instead of following it all the way down. I can ask myself whether I would speak to someone I loved the way I am speaking to myself right now. And the answer is almost always no. And that no is enough to change course. Self-love is a daily decision. It is the decision to treat your own inner world with the same seriousness and care that you would want others to treat you with. It is the decision to stop making yourself the exception to every kindness you extend. It is the decision to stop waiting until you are finished, fixed, and perfected before you allow yourself to feel at home in your own skin.
You are not a project to be completed before you deserve your own love. You are a person, whole, flawed, growing, real. And you are allowed to love that person, fully, right now, exactly as they are. Start there. Everything else becomes possible from there.